This is Tell Me Exactly, an emergency communications podcast. I'm your host, Meridith Jensen. And today I have with me Jose Rodriguez, and we're talking about the 9 misconceptions of emergency medical dispatching. Jose, thanks for joining me. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm Jose Rodriguez. I am the Deputy Chief for Implementations for Priority Dispatch. My team is part of the protocol experts, which we have all the instructors, senior master instructors that help along the way for implementations and work on these podcasts.
I was just going to say, the protocol experts are the team that came up with the concept of doing this podcast. And we also have some other initiatives like the Ask Me Anything webinars and things like that.
And we're currently at our Compass event.
So right now we're together in California doing our San Jose Compass event, which is for our California users, a little 2-day workshop where they can come and learn more about our systems. That's our team is awesome. I love our team. So how long have you been deputy chief of that department?
So of the protocol experts, it's going on 2 years now. Prior to that, I was a project manager doing implementations. And prior to that, I was the EMD, EFDQ software instructor on the Priority Dispatch side. And then prior to that, my first life, I was a senior Q at my old agency at Miami-Dade Fire Rescue.
I am so happy that you came to join me today. You and I go way back. So.
We do.
I love working on your team and being a part of the protocol experts. We've really done some exciting things over the years since the inception of that team.
Absolutely.
All right, so now let's get into it. So we're talking about the 9 misconceptions of emergency dispatch. And this comes from the principles of EMD, that textbook that all of our newly certified EMDs get when they get certified to become an emergency medical dispatcher with Priority Dispatch. So we're going to do a little series on some of the things from that textbook. So let's talk about this first one. So the first misconception that comes from that text is that the caller is too upset to respond accurately. Jose, can you speak to that?
So we hear this a lot, especially in the Q world. Meredith, as you as a Q instructor, I'm sure you've heard it. A lot of people bring it up that callers are too upset to answer any questions correctly. Why do we spend time asking questions? And that could be farther from the truth. Although they're facing an emergency and they're a little hysterical is probably not the right word, but a little nervous, things are going on. They will, using the right calming techniques, they will most of the time answer all the questions that we need accurately and with enough information to get the response out there.
Yeah, and I think to add on that, I think the most important piece is how you ask those questions and
Correct.
What things you're asking, right?
Yep.
So that's where our systems come in and are designed to kind of really drive and control these calls when things can get crazy, right? When you've got someone that's hysterical, upset, scared, frightened, angry, sad, you really do need to be kind of pointed in the way that you are interrogating them. So
even small children, you'd be surprised on how well small children respond and answer questions, even though you think of them as a kid, you don't think they're going to answer questions, but you'd be amazed how well they answer questions compared to adults sometimes.
Right, because sometimes those kids don't even really have a full grasp of the seriousness of the situation that they're calling about. And, they're sort of primed in school to just listen to adults and that adults are there to help them and answer their questions and things. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I think our research definitely shows that most callers, when they call in, are not too upset to answer questions, especially if the questions that they're being asked are kind of designed to look for specific things, right? And we definitely train our emergency dispatchers to use those calming techniques like you spoke about and kind of clarify some things in a very specific way.
Yep, without having to yell at the caller or anything like that.
Oh my goodness, let's hope not, right? No. All right, so the second misconception on our list here today is the caller doesn't know the required information.
Again, we're using misconception today, that's another big one. One of the things that I've learned over the years in one of my prior lives is, although callers are having an emergency, especially like when they're out in not at home, they're out on the streets publicly. They may not be able to give you an exact address, but they can give you enough information that you know where they are. And with today's technology, you'll always be able to at least GPS them close to where they're at. But again, using common techniques, as we mentioned from the first statement, or the first question, I'm sorry, is it really brings down their anxiety. It assures them that they're talking to a competent person that knows what to ask them.
Yeah.
And you will get the information, at least at the very minimum, a general location where they're at and their phone number.
Right. And that's really key too, right? Is, again, the way you go about it. And, I think in our systems, we talk a lot about a thing not looked for is seldom found, right? So we don't know what they don't know if we don't ask, if that makes sense.
And that's big on, and I'm sure all our listeners will agree, is even on a car accident, somebody who's driving by and reports an accident, you don't know what they saw until you ask them.
That's right.
To know what they saw.
And a lot of times, in my experience, I'm sure you probably have a shared experience, they actually know more than they think initially. They'll call in and say things like, I just drove by, I didn't stop, I didn't see anything. But if you start to ask the right types of questions, you can start to garner more and more information.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At least based on the questions you ask them, they can at least tell you that somebody was moving in the car. So if they're moving, they're conscious and breathing. So that gives you some information right there.
Yeah, or one of the examples that I always used to like to share with new trainees was more of a police example, but I think it still applies here. People that would at first say, when you would ask them about suspect information, they would say, I have no idea. But then if you follow up and start saying things like, okay, was it a man or a woman? About how old were they? Right. Were they wearing dark-colored clothing, light-colored clothing? And now you've just, with asking some specific questions in a very pointed way, you have just gotten yourself a pretty good suspect description from someone who initially said, I have no idea what they looked like, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. So I like that one. So the third one on our list here is that the dispatcher's too busy to waste time asking questions, giving instructions, or flipping through the card sets. Oh my gosh, this one sounds like somebody was really irritated when they wrote this one.
Right. I tend to hear this, and I'm sure you've had too in your experiences, right at the beginning when they're starting to use protocols. And if I can add one more thing to that misconception, is I know more than the protocol.
Oh,
because I've been a long-time firefighter, been a long-time police officer. But the misconception there is, if they really follow the protocol and ask the questions that they're being prompted to ask, they're not going to take any longer than what they already were fumbling around trying to figure out what questions to ask.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to ask something different thinking that that's what they need.
Sure.
So you're probably going to waste more time trying to figure out what questions to ask than to just follow the script. And I cannot stress enough, especially in medical, but really in all disciplines, instructions are very important.
Right.
Those little instructions that you think it's just a waste of time, again, misconception, they're very, very important instructions. Without even getting into the pre-arrival instructions like CPR or childbirth or some of the other ones, just to tell them put away the pets and that kind of stuff, that's important. I mean, I've had situations where some of my responders, where I used to work, in South Florida, Rottweilers and big dogs are a thing. Those little things, I've had firefighters getting bit by dogs because they weren't put away. Pecked by chickens, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, don't say chickens.
Yes.
I have a completely irrational fear of birds, so
I understand.
we don't even want to. We don't have time in this episode to get into that.
No, and I don't have that kind of expertise.
Well, what I really like about what you just said, Jose, is that it's not a waste of time, right? That's the biggest part of that misconception, in my opinion, is that asking for information and giving these instructions is absolutely not wasted, right? It's so critical. I mean, as you mentioned, the dispatchers are already going to be asking questions. Now we're going to be doing things with the caller and giving some instructions of things that they can be doing while they're waiting for the paramedics. And sometimes those instructions can be life-saving. So it's definitely not a waste.
No, and it's even a form of calming them also, because it gives them something to do so they don't feel... Because one of the things as a call taker, when you're talking to somebody, they feel like seconds feel like hours to them.
Yeah.
So if you're asking them to do these things, at least keeps their, obviously they're still concerned about their family member or whatever they're calling about. but at least it gives them something to keep their mind occupied so they don't feel like there's nothing going on.
Right.
There's nothing happening.
Yeah, it gives them something to focus on, and they can feel good about helping. And also, again, there's a practical element to that. They're the only person there in that situation that can put hands on and do some things to help. So why wouldn't we use that as a valuable resource? So yeah, I like that. Okay. And we also find too that dispatchers, in this industry, change is a very scary thing. And so this misconception, I'm glad that it's sort of at the top of the list because It is one of the biggest ones that we deal with. And so coming in and changing the way they do things can be very scary for any telecommunicators. But, with the right kind of training, they can become really proficient at using our systems, which ends up saving them time, doesn't it?
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to figure out what question, because you're in your mind, okay, so what question should I ask next? Where should I go here? What should I do? Well, I'm a 20-year paramedic. I think this is an important question where somebody with less experience or more experience may think different. So
yeah, and on either ends of the spectrum, whether you're new or seasoned, you could forget a question, or again, you could ask too many questions and end up wasting more time. And instead of, having a protocol in front of you that really tells you, that's backed by science, backed by research, that says these are the pieces of information that we need to focus on.
Well, let's be honest. Once you have enough information where the protocol deems, let's get somebody rolling on this right now. We'll tell you, dispatch now, and let's come back to more questions.
That's right.
Where if you don't have a script or a protocol to follow, you may not get to that.
That's
point
right.
until you ask all your questions.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that because you're right. You're balancing all those things, and our system is going to remind you to get in there and send the help. Okay. So then the next one that we have on the list here is the medical expertise of the dispatcher is not important. Wow, that one seems personal.
That seems loaded.
Yeah, that is a loaded one, isn't it?
It is.
What do you think?
So I think on this one, I don't want to take away the experience a dispatcher or call taker may have because it's something they've earned and they have their respect.
Yeah.
But in our world, in the protocols, sometimes that can be, it could contradict the thinking of the protocol. And when I say the thinking of the protocol is when we're on the phone, we're not thinking as a field responder where we're rolling up on the scene, we're assessing as we're rolling up, looking at what's going on. We're blindly on the phone. So medical expertise of the dispatcher is not important, not to demean it, but it really is important because you want to follow the protocol. You want to follow the script of the protocol to say, okay, it's, again, I'm going to use medical since we're talking about some medical stuff here is on a chest pain call, it's going to tell you, ask, 4 or 5 questions, depending, you might have an earlier send point. And it takes away that my experience versus your experience versus somebody else's experience. And again, these are all misconceptions, all kind of tied in together. At least the first 4 have been kind of all in the same boat.
Well, and I think the other thing that's important to remember about the way that the protocols are also designed is that they're designed to work with callers that by and large are completely untrained lay people, right? The caller that you're speaking to over the phone in most situations has 0 training, has 0 background or knowledge or medical expertise. So if you come at it from an angle where you're sort of talking over their head, that's going to be detrimental to the call. So I think that's also why we need to maybe kind of take that hat off a little bit and trust the program to give us the things that we need.
Yeah, because none of the questions there are very high-level questions. I mean, it's important questions, but the difference is saying serious hemorrhage versus, some big medical term that a 5-year-old child may not understand.
Right. Yeah, no, so I'm glad you said that because the other thing that you said that I think is really important is that visually impaired, we're going in blind. We can't touch anything. People that come into this industry that have experience as a paramedic like you did, right? Were you a paramedic? EMT. Your thinking is if I was there touching the patient, this is what I would want to do.
Right.
But we can't do that. We're just talking to someone over the phone.
Yeah, field units always, as they're rolling up on a call, whether it's a police, fire, EMS, they're always assessing the scene. So as I could be, 100 feet away and I'm already looking at what's going on. Okay, I see a person on the floor. Do I see any lines? Depending on the type of calls, or you're always assessing the scene. In a phone dispatch environment, you don't have that. You're based on that caller, what they're seeing.
Yeah.
So to your point, which I like your point is, you remove your paramedic hat or your medical experience hat or your fire experience hat or your police experience hat. Just trust the protocol.
Yeah.
The protocol is going to get what you need at the right point that you need it.
And I think another thing, I know that the principal's manual it has been around for a while and it was written a while ago, but I think another thing that kind of ties into this point that we're seeing in the workforce today in public safety is dispatchers coming in without that field experience.
Right.
And so, kind of bursting the bubble of this misconception of the medical expertise not being important. It's not that we don't need them to come in with that experience, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we're saying, is that they can come into this without having that field experience, and if they trust the protocols, they're going to get the information and instructions that they need.
Well, I think to your point that some centers, and I know you've gone into a few, and I've gone into a few, where they're trying to recruit right out of high school.
Yeah.
18-year-olds right out of high school and bring
Right.
them into the comm center and get them. And those are, I think it's a great concept, and you get them in early and you get them in young. And, it takes away that we know they don't have the medical
Right.
expertise, but they have the protocol.
Right.
So
I love when we can do that, because then we can mold them and shape them to use the systems exactly the way they were designed.
Exactly.
Instead of having to sort of fight against some of those
20 years of experience.
Years that they have. All right, so just to recap a little bit here, Jose. So again, the first misconceptions, we did 4 of them. The caller's too upset to respond. They don't know the required information. Dispatchers are too busy to waste time. And the medical expertise and knowledge of the dispatcher is not important. So we're going to come back with some more misconceptions in our next episode. So again, thanks so much for being here, Jose. I really respect all of the experience and knowledge that you have, and just love being a part of your team. So
I love having you, and thank you for inviting me.
Can't wait to have you back again.
See you in part 2.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to let us know what you liked, and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Look for @TellMeExactly to get the latest on all things emergency communications. Tell Me Exactly is a Priority Dispatch Corporation podcast developed by our team of protocol experts and hosted by me, Meridith Jensen, with Cody Ekman as producer, Reading Roberts as sound engineer, Scott Robinson and Jason Barber as executive producers.